Every year, thousands of travelers are stopped, fined, delayed, and in some cases arrested at airport security checkpoints, not because they were trying to smuggle contraband, but because they genuinely didn't know the rules had changed, or never knew the rules at all. TSA confiscated over 6,700 firearms from carry-on bags in a single recent year. The majority of those passengers claimed they forgot the gun was in the bag. That defense does not prevent a federal fine starting at $3,000. In 2026, enforcement has tightened across every category. CT scanning technology is now deployed at the majority of major US checkpoints. AI-assisted threat detection is flagging items that sailed through traditional X-ray for years, and international airports have implemented updated security directives that differ meaningfully from US standards. The item you carried last year without incident may be the item that stops you today. These are 10 carry-on items that are actively getting travelers fined, detained, or arrested in 2026, and the specific rules you need to understand before you pack. Number 10. Lithium battery power banks. Over 100 watt-hours. This is the fastest growing category of carry-on confiscations at major airports right now, driven by the explosion in high-capacity portable charging devices and travelers who have no idea their power bank requires airline approval above a specific threshold. The FAA rule is straightforward. Power banks and spare lithium batteries between 100 watt-hours and 160 watt-hours require airline approval before travel. Power banks exceeding 160 watt-hours are prohibited entirely on passenger aircraft. The problem is that most consumer power banks don't advertise watt-hours prominently. They advertise milliamp hours, which requires a calculation most travelers have never performed. To convert, multiply the milliampere hour rating by the voltage and divide by 1,000. A 26,800 milliampere hour power bank at 3.7 volts equals approximately 99 watt-hours, just under the threshold. A 30,000 milliampere hour bank at the Bikovkir. Same voltage clears 100 watt-hours and requires approval. Many popular high-capacity power banks sold through Amazon and major electronics retailers in 2025 and 2026 sit in the 100 watt-hours to 140 watt-hours range, the approval-required zone that most buyers never researched before purchasing. Gate confiscations of oversized power banks increased significantly in 2025 as airlines updated boarding protocols. The fine for carrying a prohibited lithium battery onto an aircraft is separate from confiscation. FAA civil penalties for lithium battery violations start at $450 and can reach $10,000 for aggravated cases. Check the BOH rating on every power bank before travel. If it's not printed on the device, calculate it or contact the manufacturer. Number 9. Realistic replica or toy firearms. A toy gun that looks realistic enough to be mistaken for an actual firearm is treated at the security checkpoint with the same protocol as an actual firearm. That means law enforcement notification, potential detention, missed flights, and in jurisdictions where carrying a realistic imitation firearm in public is a criminal offense, potential arrest. This catches parents, collectors, and cosplay travelers who packed a prop weapon in a carry-on without considering how it would appear on an X-ray screen. The TSA officer does not have the ability to determine from a scan alone whether an object is real or replica. When the image is ambiguous, the bag is pulled, the item is examined, and the traveler is detained during that process. Realistic prop firearms, replica handguns, airsoft guns, and BB guns must travel in checked luggage, declared in a hard-sided locked container, following the same protocols as real firearms. The consequences of getting this wrong range from confiscation and a missed flight to a formal law enforcement contact that appears on your travel record. Number 8. Certain knives, multi-tools, and sharp objects. Pocket knives are prohibited in carry-on luggage on US flights. Regardless of blade length, a rule that has been in place since 2001 but continues to generate thousands of confiscations annually because travelers conflate the rules for international flights, checked baggage, and carry-on. A 2013 TSA proposal to allow small knives in carry-on was withdrawn following industry opposition. The prohibition remains total for bladed instruments. The specific items that surprise travelers most frequently: box cutters and razor blades prohibited, regardless of whether they're in a utility tool. Multi-tools with knife blades prohibited even if the blade is folded and the tool has non-prohibited functions. Scissors with blades longer than 4 inches measured from the pivot point prohibited, and any knife regardless of blade length. Swiss Army knives and Leatherman-style multi-tools with blades must go in checked luggage. Scissors with blades shorter than 4 inches are permitted. Nail clippers are permitted. The line is specifically drawn at knife blades, and it is not negotiable at the checkpoint regardless of intent or blade size. International rules vary. The EU prohibits sharp objects broadly in carry-on. Australia's rules align closely with the US. Verify destination-specific rules for any sharp implement before packing. Number 7. Oversized or improperly packed lithium batteries in checked bags. This is the reverse of the power bank issue, and it catches travelers from the opposite direction. While spare lithium batteries and power banks must travel in carry-on, damaged, recalled, or improperly protected lithium batteries of any size are prohibited from both carry-on and checked baggage. The practical trap: travelers who pack laptops, tablets, or camera equipment in checked luggage with non-removable batteries that show visible damage, swelling, or recall status. Airlines and TSA have updated screening protocols for checked baggage specifically targeting lithium battery condition and a visibly swollen laptop battery discovered during checked bag screening results in the item being pulled from the flight. More significantly, e-bike batteries, hoverboard batteries, and large lithium battery packs from power sports equipment are prohibited from passenger aircraft entirely, carry-on and checked. This prohibition has existed for years, but enforcement at check-in counters has intensified following several high-profile in-flight lithium battery incidents in 2024 and 2025. Attempting to check an e-bike battery at the counter now frequently results in the item being refused and, in cases where travelers attempt to conceal the battery, a formal security referral. Number 6. Marijuana and cannabis products, including legal state products. This is the item generating the most genuine surprise among travelers in 2026, because the legal landscape around cannabis in the United States has created a widespread and incorrect assumption that legal state marijuana is permissible in carry-on luggage for domestic flights. It is not. TSA operates under federal law. Marijuana remains a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law regardless of state legalization status. TSA officers who discover cannabis products during screening are required to refer the matter to law enforcement. What happens after that referral depends on the jurisdiction. At airports in legal states, local law enforcement may take no further action for small quantities. At airports in prohibition states, a possession charge is a real possibility. The 2026 addition to this issue, CBD and hemp-derived products occupy a legal gray area that has generated increased checkpoint friction. Products with THC content above 0.3% are federally prohibited regardless of labeling. Many hemp-derived products sold legally in retail environments exceed this threshold, despite labeling that suggests otherwise. If a TSA officer refers a CBD product to law enforcement and testing reveals THC content above the federal threshold, the outcome depends entirely on the jurisdiction and the officer's discretion, neither of which you can predict. The only safe approach for air travel: leave all cannabis and cannabis-derived products out of carry-on and checked luggage for air travel until federal rescheduling produces clear TSA policy guidance, which has not yet occurred as of 2026. Number 5. Large quantities of cash. Carrying cash on a domestic US flight is not illegal. There is no federal law prohibiting any amount of cash in carry-on or checked luggage for domestic air travel. This fact, however, does not protect travelers from a consequence that thousands of cash-carrying passengers encounter annually: civil asset forfeiture by law enforcement at or near airport checkpoints. Under civil asset forfeiture laws, law enforcement can seize cash they believe is connected to criminal activity without charging the owner with a crime. The burden is then on the owner to prove the money is legitimate to get it back, a legal process that can take months and cost more in attorney fees than the seized amount. Large cash amounts, generally $5,000 and above, though seizures have occurred at lower thresholds, discovered during TSA screening, are frequently referred to DEA, or local law enforcement agents who work airport details specifically targeting cash seizures. Travelers with documented legitimate sources for large cash amounts, business proceeds, estate distributions, real estate transactions, should carry that documentation when transporting significant cash through airports. Internationally, $10,000 or more in currency must be declared on customs forms. Failure to declare results in mandatory seizure and potential criminal charges, not a warning. Number 4. Certain foods, agricultural products, and biological material. Domestic travelers are generally unaware that TSA screening and US Customs and Border Protection operate simultaneously at international arrival airports, and that certain food and agricultural items in carry-on bags create legal exposure at both levels. For international arrivals into the United States, all food, plant material, soil, and animal products must be declared on the CBP declaration form, regardless of country of origin or perceived risk. Fresh fruits and vegetables from many international origins are prohibited entry entirely. Meat products from most international origins require certification or are prohibited. Failure to declare prohibited items discovered during CBP inspection carries minimum fines of $300 for first offenses, escalating to $10,000 for repeat violations or items with significant biosecurity risk. The items generating the most 2026 enforcement actions: travelers returning from Caribbean and Latin American destinations with undeclared tropical fruits, travelers from Asian destinations with undeclared meat products, and travelers returning from European trips with specialty cheeses and cured meats that exceed permitted quantities or originate from non-approved sources. Australia and New Zealand maintain the strictest biosecurity enforcement globally. Items that pass US CBP without issue will be confiscated and fined in Sydney or Auckland. Declare everything. The cost of voluntary declaration is $0. The cost of discovered non-declaration starts at $500 in Australia and escalates rapidly for items classified as high biosecurity risk. Number 3. Flammable, pressurized, and explosive items. The category that generates the most criminal referrals, as opposed to civil fines, is improperly packed flammable and explosive material. The items that surprise travelers most are not the obvious ones. They are the everyday products that contain compressed gas, flammable liquid, or oxidizing material that travelers carry without understanding their transportation classification. Spray cans of any kind, hairspray, dry shampoo, spray sunscreen, spray paint, are subject to quantity limits in carry-on and prohibited in checked. Baggage in large quantities. Small aerosols for personal care are permitted in carry-on within the 311 liquid rule. Larger quantities must meet hazardous material transport regulations that passenger baggage does not qualify under. Compressed gas cylinders, including CO2 cartridges for bike tires, paintball equipment, and culinary applications, are prohibited from both carry-on and checked baggage when they contain residual gas. Empty, punctured cylinders may be transported in checked baggage. Full or partially full cylinders are prohibited without exception. Fireworks, sparklers, and any pyrotechnic device are federally prohibited from both carry-on and checked baggage on passenger aircraft. Travelers caught attempting to transport fireworks face federal criminal charges, not civil fines. The distinction matters considerably in terms of long-term legal consequences. Number 2. Firearms transported incorrectly. Over 6,700 firearms were discovered in carry-on bags at TSA checkpoints in a single recent year. The majority of passengers involved claimed they forgot the firearm was in the bag. That claim does not constitute a legal defense, and the consequences are severe regardless of intent. A firearm discovered in carry-on baggage generates an automatic law enforcement referral, a mandatory TSA civil penalty starting at $3,000 and reaching $13,910 for aggravated violations and potential state criminal charges, depending on the airport's jurisdiction. Passengers with TSA pre-check can lose their known traveler status permanently following a firearm violation. Firearms can be transported legally in checked baggage following specific requirements, unloaded in a hard-sided locked container, declared verbally to the airline at check-in with a signed declaration placed inside the container. Ammunition must be in its original packaging or a manufacturer equivalent container. Loose ammunition in checked luggage is prohibited. The travelers most frequently caught concealed carry permit holders who transferred their everyday carry firearm into a bag they later used as carry-on without checking its contents, and travelers who packed range bags into carry-on after a shooting range visit. Before every flight, physically verify the contents of every bag you are checking or carrying. There is no fine for finding your own firearm before the checkpoint. There is a $3,000 to $13,000 fine for TSA finding it. Number 1. Undeclared currency and monetary instruments, over $10,000. The single item most consistently resulting in criminal charges, not civil fines, not confiscation, but federal criminal prosecution, is undeclared currency or monetary instruments exceeding $10,000 at international borders. Federal law requires declaration of $10,000 or more in currency or monetary instruments when entering or departing the United States. This threshold applies to cash, traveler's checks, money orders, and certain negotiable instruments combined. The declaration requirement exists in both directions. Departing passengers carrying $10,000 or more must file a FinCEN 105 form with U.S. Customs before departure. Failure to declare is a federal crime. Currency structuring and smuggling charges carry penalties including the mandatory forfeiture of the entire undeclared amount plus fines and potential imprisonment up to 5 years. These are not traffic ticket equivalents. They are federal criminal charges with lasting consequences. The travelers most frequently caught: people carrying business proceeds from cash-intensive industries, travelers receiving large cash gifts from family abroad, and people who structured their carrying to stay just below thresholds, which is itself a federal crime called structuring, carrying the same penalties as outright non-declaration. Declare the money. The declaration process takes approximately 3 minutes and has no legal consequence for money with a legitimate source. The consequence of non-declaration, if discovered, can be measured in years and the entirety of the amount carried. Every item on this list has one thing in common: the travelers caught by these rules were not criminals. They were uninformed. And in 2026, with enhanced screening technology, updated enforcement protocols, and tightened international requirements, being uninformed carries consequences that were far less likely to materialize even 3 years ago. Research your specific items before every trip. Verify the rules for your destination country, not just your departure point. Declare everything declarable, and physically check every bag before you arrive at a checkpoint, because the officer on the other side of that scanner does not have the authority to accept good intentions as a substitute for compliance. If this kept you out of trouble before your next flight, share it with someone who travels and might not know these rules. Subscribe for travel and consumer guides built on current enforcement data. Drop a comment with the item that surprised you most on this list.